The letter arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under the door like a blade. Ethan Carter, 22, stared at the crisp envelope, his name scrawled in his father's unmistakable handwriting, and felt his stomach drop. He hadn't spoken to his dad in 2 years, not since the night he came out, and his world shattered. Ethan tore open the letter, his hands trembling. "You are no longer my son," it began, each word a fresh wound. His father, Robert Carter, a wealthy real estate tycoon in upstate New York, had disowned him after Ethan admitted he was gay, kicking him out of the family's sprawling estate with nothing but a backpack and a broken heart. The letter went on. Robert had chosen a new heir, a distant cousin named Marcus, to take Ethan's place in the family business and his life. "Marcus is the son I should have had," it read. Ethan's knees buckled, and he sank to the floor of his tiny apartment, the words blurring through tears. But there, in that dim, drafty room, something sparked inside him, a flicker of defiance. He wasn't just going to fade away. He'd fight back, not just for himself, but for the love he'd found in the ashes of his family's betrayal. Ethan met Liam Harper 6 months after his exile, at a dive bar in Albany where the jukebox played old Springsteen songs. Liam, with his tousled blonde hair and easy smile, was everything Ethan wasn't. Confident, unapologetic, and fiercely proud of who he was. A carpenter by trade, Liam had grown up in a working-class family that embraced him when he came out at 16. That night, over cheap beers and shared stories, Ethan felt something he hadn't in years. Hope. Liam's laugh, warm and unguarded, pulled Ethan out of his shell, and by the end of the night, they were dancing under the bar's flickering neon lights, oblivious to the world. Now, 2 years later, they shared a cramped apartment, a life built on late-night talks and stolen kisses. But Ethan carried his father's rejection like a weight, a shadow that lingered even in their happiest moments. Liam noticed it, the way Ethan's eyes darkened when he spoke of his family, the way he flinched at the mention of his old life. "You don't need them," Liam would say, pulling Ethan close. "You've got me." And Ethan believed him, but the letter changed everything. The next morning, Ethan sat at their wobbly kitchen table, the letter crumpled beside his coffee mug. Liam slid into the chair across from him, his blue eyes sharp with concern. "What's the plan, Eth?" he asked, voice steady but laced with worry. Ethan didn't know. His father's empire, Carter Properties, was a juggernaut, and Robert's influence stretched across the state. To fight back meant taking on a man who'd built his life on control, a man who'd rather erase his son than accept him. "I'm not letting him win," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "He can't just replace me with some stranger and pretend I don't exist." Liam reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Then we'll fight together," he said. "But how?" Ethan's mind raced. He'd been cut off from the family fortune, but he hadn't forgotten the inner workings of Carter Properties. As a teenager, he'd shadowed his father at board meetings, learning the business's secrets, its shady deals, its hidden accounts. If he could expose Robert's corruption, he might not only reclaim his place but also dismantle the legacy that had crushed him. The plan was risky, almost impossible. Ethan had no resources, no allies in his father's world. But he had Liam, and he had a truth worth fighting for. That night, they pored over old emails Ethan had saved from his time at Carter Properties, searching for anything incriminating. Liam kept the coffee coming, his presence a steady anchor as Ethan dug into memories he'd tried to bury. By dawn, they'd found a lead. A series of emails hinting at illegal land deals Robert had orchestrated to expand his empire. The next week was a blur of action. Ethan reached out to an old high school friend, Sarah, now a journalist at a local paper. She'd always been fearless, and when Ethan told her about the emails, her eyes lit up. "This could be huge," she said, scribbling notes. "But you're going up against your dad, Ethan. He's not just powerful, he's ruthless." Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. "I know. That's why I have to do this." Sarah agreed to help, but they needed more evidence. Ethan and Liam spent nights combing through public records, cross-referencing properties tied to Carter properties. They worked in secret, knowing Robert's reach could silence them if they weren't careful. One night, as they sat hunched over Liam's laptop, Ethan felt a surge of gratitude. "I don't know how I'd do this without you," he whispered. Liam grinned, brushing a kiss against Ethan's temple. "You'd manage, but I'm not going anywhere." Their search led them to a derelict warehouse on the outskirts of Albany, a property listed under a shell company tied to Robert. Ethan's heart pounded as they drove out under cover of darkness, the city lights fading behind them. The warehouse was a hulking shadow, its windows boarded up, but inside, they found stacks of documents, proof of Robert's underhanded deals. Ethan's hands shook as he photographed page after page, each one a step toward justice. But as they slipped out, headlights swept across the lot. A black SUV screeched to a stop, and Ethan's blood ran cold. He recognized the driver, one of his father's security goons. "Run," Liam hissed, grabbing Ethan's hand. They sprinted into the night, the sound of footsteps pounding behind them. Their breaths came in sharp gasps as they tore through the overgrown field behind the warehouse. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears, the weight of the camera in his pocket a reminder of what they'd risked everything to get. Liam's hand was a lifeline, pulling him forward as the shouts of their pursuers grew louder. They ducked behind a rusted shipping container, hearts racing. Ethan peered around the edge, spotting the security guard scanning the darkness with a flashlight. "We can't outrun them," Ethan whispered, panic creeping into his voice. Liam's eyes flicked to the woods beyond the field. "We don't have to," he said, his voice steady despite the danger. "We just need to be smarter." They waited, crouched low, until the guard moved past. Then, with a silent nod, they bolted for the trees, weaving through the dense underbrush. Branches snagged at Ethan's jacket, but he didn't stop until they reached a narrow stream, its water glinting under the moonlight. They waded through, the cold biting at their ankles, and emerged on the other side, hidden by the forest's embrace. The sounds of pursuit faded, and Ethan let out a shaky breath. "We made it," he said, almost disbelieving. Liam pulled him into a quick, fierce hug. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice a mix of relief and determination. "Those documents, you think they're enough?" Ethan nodded, clutching the camera. "They have to be. It's all we've got." Back at their apartment, they uploaded the photos to Sarah, who was already digging into the shell company's records. She called them the next morning, her voice electric with excitement. "This is bigger than I thought," she said. "Your dad's been funneling money through fake companies to dodge taxes and bribe officials. If we can tie this to him directly, he's done." Ethan felt a surge of hope, but also dread. Exposing his father meant burning the last bridge to his past, a final severance from the man who'd raised him. Liam sensed his hesitation. That night, as they lay in bed, the city humming outside their window, he traced circles on Ethan's back. "You're not betraying him, he said softly. "He betrayed you first." Ethan turned to face him, their foreheads touching in the dark. I wish it didn't have to be like this," he admitted. Liam kissed him, slow and grounding. "I know, but you're not alone in this." The next day, Sarah uncovered a name in the documents. Marcus Grayson, the cousin Robert had named as his new heir. Marcus wasn't just a replacement. He was complicit, signing off on the shady deals. Ethan's anger flared. This wasn't just about his father anymore. Marcus had willingly stepped into Ethan's life, profiting from his pain. "We need to confront him," Ethan said, his voice hard. Liam raised an eyebrow. "You sure? He's not going to welcome us with open arms." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't care. He needs to know I'm not invisible." They tracked Marcus to a sleek office building in downtown Albany, part of Carter Properties' expanding portfolio. Ethan's heart pounded as they approached, the glass facade reflecting the crisp autumn sky. Inside, Marcus sat behind a polished desk, his tailored suit a stark contrast to Ethan's worn jeans. He was younger than Ethan expected, maybe mid-20s, with sharp features and an air of arrogance. "Ethan," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair, unsurprised. "I wondered when you'd show up." Marcus laughed, cold and sharp. "You think you can touch us? You're nothing now, Ethan. Just a ghost." But his eyes flickered with unease, and Ethan knew they'd rattled him. As they left, Liam squeezed his hand. "He's scared," he said. "We're getting close." That night, Sarah called with a breakthrough. A whistleblower from Carter Properties, a former accountant named Karen, was willing to talk. She'd seen Robert and Marcus falsify records firsthand. Ethan and Liam met her in a dimly lit diner, her hands trembling as she slid a USB drive across the table. "This has everything," she whispered. "Bank transfers, forged contracts, all of it. But if they find out I gave this to you," her voice trailed off, fear in her eyes. Ethan promised to protect her identity, but the weight of her trust settled heavily on him. Back home, they reviewed the files, each one a nail in his father's coffin. But the deeper they dug, the more dangerous it became. A late-night call from an unknown number left Ethan's blood cold. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." The line went dead before he could respond. Liam's face was grim as Ethan told him. "They know we're onto them," he said. "We need to move fast." Ethan nodded, but fear gnawed at him. This wasn't just about him anymore. Liam was in the crosshairs too. The thought of losing him was unbearable. As they sat together, the city's lights casting shadows on their walls, Ethan made a silent vow. He'd protect Liam, no matter the cost. The threat hung over them like a storm cloud, but Ethan refused to back down. The USB drive from Karen was a goldmine: bank statements, emails, and contracts that tied Robert and Marcus to a web of corruption spanning years. Ethan and Liam worked late into the night, sorting through the evidence with Sarah over video calls, their apartment a mess of coffee cups and scribbled notes. Sarah's voice crackled through the laptop. "This is enough to take them to court," she said, her excitement tempered by caution. "But we need to go public strategically. If we drop this too soon, Robert's lawyers will bury it." Ethan agreed, but the anonymous call gnawed at him. Whoever was watching them wasn't just guessing. They knew exactly what Ethan was doing. The next day, Ethan and Liam drove to a small law firm in Syracuse, recommended by Sarah for its reputation in taking on corporate giants. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Diane, listened as Ethan laid out their case. Her office was cluttered with legal books and framed photos of her kids, a stark contrast to the sterile boardrooms of Carter Properties. "You've got a strong case," Diane said, flipping through the documents. "But you're not just fighting a lawsuit. You're fighting a man who'll do anything to protect his empire." Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. "I know who he is. That's why I'm here." Diane agreed to represent them, but warned it would be a brutal fight. As they left her office, Liam slipped his hand into Ethan's, a quiet reminder of what they were fighting for. "We're doing this," Liam said, his voice firm, "together." But the pressure was mounting. That night, Ethan woke to the sound of shattering glass. He bolted upright, heart racing, as Liam flicked on the light. Their apartment window was a jagged hole, a brick lying on the floor amid shards of glass. Taped to it was a note: "Last warning." Ethan's hands shook as he read it, fear and anger colliding in his chest. Liam pulled him close, his voice steady despite the chaos. "They're desperate," he said. "That means we're winning." The police came, took a report, and left with promises to investigate. But Ethan knew better than to trust they'd find anything. Robert's influence ran deep, and this was his kind of move: intimidation, not confrontation. Ethan and Liam cleaned up the glass in silence, the weight of the threat settling between them. "Maybe we should stop," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Liam shook his head, fierce. "No way. They don't get to scare us into submission." The next morning, Sarah published a teaser article online, hinting at a major expose on Carter Properties without naming Ethan or the whistleblower. The response was immediate. her inbox flooded with tips from others who'd been burned by Robert's deals. Ethan felt a flicker of hope, but also dread. The article had poked the bear, and Robert wouldn't stay quiet for long. Sure enough, 2 days later, Marcus showed up at their apartment. Ethan opened the door, startled to see his cousin standing there, his face a mask of controlled anger. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said, stepping inside without invitation. Liam moved to Ethan's side, his presence a quiet warning. "You think you can take him down?" Marcus continued, his voice low. "He'll crush you, Ethan. Walk away, and he might let you live." Ethan's anger flared. "He already took everything from me," he said, his voice shaking but strong. "I'm not afraid of him anymore." Marcus's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, Liam stepped forward. "Get out," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Marcus hesitated, then left, slamming the door behind him. The encounter left Ethan rattled, but it also clarified something. Marcus wasn't as untouchable as he seemed. He was nervous, and that meant they were close to breaking through. Ethan and Liam doubled down, working with Diane to prepare a legal filing that would expose Robert's crimes to the world. The evidence was airtight, but they needed one final piece, a direct link to Robert himself. Sarah came through again, tracking down a former business partner who'd fallen out with Robert years ago. The man, Greg, agreed to meet them in a crowded coffee shop, his eyes darting nervously as he spoke. "Robert kept a private ledger," Greg said, his voice low. "It's got every dirty deal he's ever made. If you can get it, he's finished." He slid a napkin across the table with an address, a storage unit in Rochester. Ethan and Liam drove out that night, the road stretching dark and endless before them. The storage unit was tucked in an industrial park, its lock rusted but intact. Ethan's hands shook as he cut it open with bolt cutters, revealing a dusty box inside. The ledger was there, its pages filled with Robert's meticulous handwriting, dates, amounts, names. It was everything they needed. But as they drove back, headlights flared in their rearview mirror. A car was tailing them, too close, too deliberate. Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. "Hold on," he said, flooring the gas. The chase was on. The car roared through the night, Ethan's knuckles white on the steering wheel as the headlights behind them grew closer. Liam clutched the ledger, his face tense but focused. "Take the next exit," he said, scanning the dark highway. Ethan swerved onto a side road, tires screeching, but the pursuing car stayed on their tail, its engine a low growl in the silence. Ethan's mind raced. This wasn't just about the ledger, it was about everything they'd fought for, everything they'd built together. He couldn't let it end here, not when they were so close. "There's a town up ahead," Liam said, pointing to a faint glow on the horizon. "We can lose them there." Ethan nodded, pushing the car to its limits, the speedometer climbing as the road blurred beneath them. They hit the town's main street, a sleepy strip of diners and gas stations. Ethan wove through side streets, taking sharp turns until the headlights vanished. They pulled into an alley behind a closed hardware store, cutting the engine and waiting, breathless. Minutes passed, the night quiet except for their ragged breathing. "I think we lost them," Liam whispered, his hand finding Ethan's in the dark. Ethan squeezed it, his heart still pounding. "We can't keep running," he said. "We need to end this." Back at their apartment, they handed the ledger to Diane, who called it a slam dunk. With Sarah's help, they prepared to go public. The plan was simple but bold. A press conference, backed by the evidence, to expose Robert and Marcus before they could strike again. Diane filed an emergency injunction to freeze Carter Properties' assets, citing fraud and corruption. The legal wheels were turning, but Ethan knew his father wouldn't go down without a fight. The press conference was set for a Friday morning at the county courthouse. Ethan stood in their bathroom, staring at his reflection as he adjusted his tie. He barely recognized the man looking back. Stronger, surer, shaped by love and loss. Liam appeared behind him, resting his chin on Ethan's shoulder. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. Ethan turned, kissing him gently. "As long as you're with me." The courthouse steps buzzed with reporters, cameras flashing as Ethan, Liam, Sarah, and Diane stepped forward. Ethan's voice shook at first but grew stronger as he spoke, laying out his father's crimes with unflinching clarity. "This isn't just about me," he said, his eyes scanning the crowd. "It's about everyone my father hurt to build his empire. It's about truth." Liam stood beside him, a quiet pillar of strength, as Sarah presented the documents and Diane outlined the legal case. The story exploded online, trending within hours. Carter Properties' stock plummeted, and Robert's carefully crafted image began to crack. But Ethan knew the real battle was coming. That night, as they watched the news in their apartment, a knock at the door made Ethan's heart stop. He opened it to find his father standing there, his face a mask of cold fury. "You think you've won?" Robert said, stepping inside. His presence filled the room, suffocating, like it had when Ethan was a child. "You're still the same weak boy I threw out." Ethan's chest tightened, old fears rising, but Liam's hand on his back grounded him. "I'm not weak," Ethan said, his voice steady. "And I'm not alone." Robert's eyes flicked to Liam, his lip curling. "You chose this over your family," he spat. "You're nothing to me." Ethan stepped closer, meeting his father's gaze. "You made that choice, not me. And now the world knows who you really are." For the first time, Robert looked rattled, his confidence faltering. He left without another word, but Ethan knew this wasn't over. The next day, Marcus called, his voice frantic. "Meet me," he said. "I can make this go away." Against Liam's protests, Ethan agreed, sensing a crack in Marcus's armor. They met at a park, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot. Marcus looked haggard, his bravado gone. "I didn't sign up for this," he said, pacing. "Your dad, he's out of control. I'll testify against him if you back off me." Ethan weighed his options. Marcus's testimony could seal the case, but trusting him was a gamble. "Why should I believe you?" Ethan asked. Marcus met his eyes, desperate. "Because I'm not like him. I never wanted to hurt you." Ethan didn't trust him fully, but he nodded. "Talk to my lawyer. No deals until you prove it." Back home, Liam was furious. "He's playing you, he said, his voice tight. "He's just like your dad." Ethan shook his head. "Maybe, but if he's telling the truth, we need him." The argument hung between them, a rare crack in their unity. That night, they lay in bed, silent, the weight of the fight straining their bond. Ethan reached for Liam's hand, whispering, "I can't lose you." Liam sighed, pulling him close. "You won't." As the legal battle loomed, Ethan felt the stakes rising. They were so close, but one wrong move could cost them everything. The courtroom was a sea of murmurs as Ethan took the stand, his heart pounding but his resolve unshaken. The past weeks had been a whirlwind. Marcus's testimony, secured after tense negotiations, had corroborated the ledger and Karen's evidence, painting a damning picture of Robert's corruption. Ethan's father sat across the room, his face a mask of defiance, but Ethan saw the cracks, the tight set of his jaw, the way his hands clenched the table. Diane led Ethan through his testimony, her questions sharp and precise. He spoke of the letter, the disownment, the years of rejection that had fueled his fight. "I didn't want to destroy my father," he said, his voice steady despite the eyes on him. "I wanted to be seen, to be enough." The room was silent, the weight of his words settling over the crowd. Liam, seated in the front row, gave him a small nod, his presence a lifeline. When Robert took the stand, he was all charm, spinning a tale of a troubled son who'd turned against his family. But Diane was relentless, presenting the ledger, the emails, and Marcus's testimony. Robert's composure cracked, his voice rising as he denied everything. The judge's gavel fell, silencing him, and Ethan felt a surge of hope. The truth was winning. The trial stretched over days, each one a test of Ethan's strength. Liam was there every step, sneaking him coffee during breaks, whispering encouragement when doubt crept in. One night, as they walked home under the stars, Ethan stopped, pulling Liam into a kiss. "I love you," he said, the words raw and real. Liam smiled, his eyes shining. "I know, and I'm so damn proud of you." The verdict came on a crisp October morning. The courtroom held its breath as the judge read the decision. Robert Carter was guilty of fraud, tax evasion, and bribery. Carter Properties would be dismantled, its assets seized. Ethan exhaled, years of pain and anger releasing in that moment. Robert didn't look at him as he was led away, but Ethan didn't need his acknowledgement anymore. He'd fought and he'd won. Outside, reporters swarmed, but Ethan and Liam slipped away, driving to the lakeside where they'd shared their first real moment. The water shimmered under the setting sun, and Ethan felt lighter than he ever had. "It's over," he said, his voice soft. Liam shook his head, smiling. "No, it's just beginning. You're free now, eh." They stood on the dock, hands intertwined, the world stretching out before them. Ethan thought of the boy he'd been, scared, rejected, alone, and realized he wasn't that boy anymore. He was a man who'd fought for his truth, who'd found love in the wreckage. The signpost by the dock, carved with their story's heart, seemed to glow in the fading light. Love fights back against all odds. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and Liam rebuilt their lives. Sarah's exposé won awards, shining a light on others who'd been silenced by power. Marcus, stripped of his inheritance, disappeared from Albany, a footnote in their victory. Ethan started a small business with Liam, a carpentry shop that became a haven for others like them, people who'd been told they weren't enough but kept fighting anyway. Their apartment, once a battlefield of papers and fear, became a home again. They hosted friends, laughed over late-night dinners, and planned a future that was theirs alone. Ethan never heard from his father again, but he didn't need to. He'd reclaimed his story, not as Robert Carter's son, but as Ethan, loved, whole, and unbreakable. One evening, as snow fell outside, Ethan proposed to Liam on that same lakeside dock, a simple ring in his trembling hand. Liam's laugh was bright, his yes unwavering. They married the next spring, surrounded by friends who'd become family, under a sky that felt endless. Ethan looked at Liam, his partner in every fight, and knew that no betrayal could ever break them. Their story wasn't just about winning a lawsuit or toppling an empire. It was about love that refused to be erased, about standing tall when the world tried to push you down. Ethan had been rejected for being gay, his father had tried to replace him, but he'd fought back, and in that fight, he'd found himself. He'd found Liam, and together they'd found a life worth fighting for.